Now to a cover story tonight. Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India has ordered the withdrawal of a press release issued by the country's Ministry of Information and Broadcasting last night. The release announced that journalists propagating fake news, journalists spreading fake news, will have their press accreditation withdrawn. While the media in this country is debating the motives behind the release and the U-turn, WION Gravitas asked these questions. How does one define fake news? Who has the authority to define it? How does one control the internet or chat applications without losing the tenets of democracy? Where do you draw the line is the question. But first, let's take you through what happened today. The decree from the Information and Broadcasting Ministry attracted widespread criticism from journalists of all hues in India. What did the ministry say? It laid down new rules on curbing fake news. Ostensibly, that was the purpose. Complaints of misinformation relating to print media would be referred to the Press Council of India, it said. Complaints related to fake news on television will go to the News Broadcasters Association. What about the punishment? The guilty parties could lose their press accreditation. This was the proposal from the ministry. It was denounced as an unprecedented move to control the press ahead of the general election, which is due next year. Some of you would ask, why is press accreditation so important for journalists? It's basically required by journalists, by reporters to visit ministries and attend news conferences and seminars organized by the government departments. It is like a ticket, a gate pass of sorts. Revoking it then amounts to limiting a journalist's access to government departments and ministries. What the new rule did not specify was what constitutes fake news. In simple English, it is used to refer to fabricated news, news which is not based on facts but is presented as being factually accurate. It's a term that was not part of public vocabulary until a few months back. Now, it's everywhere. It is being called one of the biggest threats to democracy. There cannot be one single definition to describe this menace. The phenomenon is so widespread now and contentious that the jury is still out on who or what defines it and how. In other words, information that is completely made up, manipulated to resemble credible journalism and attract maximum attention, often with malicious intent. And it is not as innocuous as it may sound. 2016, the year of Trump's election, is when the term fake news gained currency. In 2017, fake news stories were created and circulated so rapidly that no country has managed to escape this phenomenon. The spread of misinformation was seen not only on social media, but sometimes even the mainstream media, the traditional media, newspapers and television stations fell prey to it. Here's a look at some of the most infamous fake news stories worldwide in the year past.
To say US President Donald Trump coined the term fake news would be, well, fake news. Though one can't fault you for thinking so, as it was Trump who made the phrase popular. In today's internet age, spreading fake news is not a mammoth task, and while some of them provide comic relief, there are others that have serious consequences. Take for example the conspiracy theory called Pizzagate. It started with a rumor in the United States that sex slaves were being held under a Washington pizza restaurant. What followed was a mindless shooting at that very eatery. A 28-year-old man walked into the restaurant and opened fire. In 2012, rumors originated in the IT capital of India that prompted an exodus of nearly 12,000 people of Northeast origin from Bengaluru. A message was circulated that claimed that people from Assam residing in Bengaluru would be attacked. A simple message was enough to create panic. In May last year, misinformation cost lives in India's eastern state of Jharkhand, when a mob went on a killing spree after a simple WhatsApp message. Another instance from the election year in the United States was the voter fraud. In November 2016, a Los Angeles-based website claimed that 25 million votes cast for Hillary Clinton were completely fraudulent, meaning that the Democratic candidate actually lost the popular vote by a huge margin. They say a picture speaks 1,000 words. Another instance of fake news was a Photoshop tweet about a shark swimming on the flooded freeways of Houston during Hurricane Harvey. United States' first family is a matter of gossip for several Americans. In October, one theory that took social media by storm was that First Lady Melania Trump employed a lookalike who regularly filled in for her during certain public appearances. One example from India that had social media abuzz was in November 2016. At the time of the currency demonetization, reports emerged even in mainstream media that the new 2000 rupee notes had a GPS chip embedded in them. But in reality, no such advanced features had made their way into the new currency notes. Rumour mongering has been around since the beginning of time. But we are now faced with an organized fake news explosion. And no country is isolated from that. Bureau Report, WION.
No country is isolated or insulated from this menace. So what are they doing to counter it is the question. Let's start with the US. The First Amendment of the American Constitution protects the right to freely exchange ideas, even false or controversial ones. The only legal recourse then against what is deemed fake news is a defamation lawsuit in America. You can sue someone if they publish a false fact about you and you suffered some sort of damage. As a result, such as the loss of a job or a tarnished reputation, you can go to court and say that this is a story that affected you personally. The lawsuit does not just target the person who first published the fake story, it extends to anyone who republishes it on a website or a blog. Remember how First Lady Melania Trump settled defamation lawsuits against a Maryland blogger who published an article in August last year, and the online Daily Mail that published a similar false article later that month. Now to France, where President Emmanuel Macron has proposed new rules to crack down on fake news following a surge in uncensored content during the last national elections, which, by the way, the man himself won. So what does this proposal say? It grants emergency powers to judges to remove or block certain content deemed to be fake during sensitive election periods, essentially censorship. It also seeks to curb sponsored content to ensure more transparency. Neighbouring Germany, meanwhile, has a law that demands that social media sites remove hate speech, fake news and illegal material. This law mandates that sites that do not remove illegal posts be slapped with a fine of up to 50 million euros. The legislation gives such platforms and networks 24 hours to act after they have been informed about objectionable material. While the obvious focus websites are Facebook, Twitter and YouTube in rules like this, they may also apply or be applied to Reddit, Tumblr, Vimeo and Flickr. Closer home, Malaysia has been the latest entrant to the group of nations that have a mechanism in place against fake news, and this island nation has a new law now that was passed yesterday. This law punishes citizens on social media or those working at a digital publication for spreading fake news. Those guilty are liable to pay a fine of up to $120,000 and a possible prison sentence of up to 6 years. The law has been trashed by the opposition there. They're calling it an attempt to muzzle free speech. Finally, Singapore. The country has been working towards enforcing a law to tackle the spread of misinformation. A parliamentary select committee was set up earlier this year to examine whether Singapore needs a law to prevent online falsehoods. An 8-day meeting was held in March, where representatives from social media giants like Facebook and Twitter were asked to appear before this committee to discuss the issue. The idea of a legislation had these tech giants jittery, and Facebook representative thought offence was the best form of defence. We'd like you to watch how the Singapore law minister took the Facebook representative to task, asking some very tough questions. Take a look at this.
31, TechCrunch. It says, Stretch, along with counsel from both Twitter and Google, were criticized as being non-committal in some of the answers, including on the issue of banning foreign currency in political ads. Would you accept that as an accurate characterization?
I'd actually like to speak to the chair at this point. I'm not certain that this is a fair use of this committee's time. Unfair to ask me about this. This committee is looking into the issue of deliberate online falsehoods here in Singapore. Myself and my colleague and other people on this panel have come here prepared to answer questions of that and to help the committee understand it. I don't think it's fair to ask me detailed questions about evidence given by my colleague to a different parliament in a different country about activities associated with that country. And I really would like the chairman to consider whether this line of questioning is appropriate.
Yeah, okay. You want to say something?
I will explain to you why. Obviously, the 15-minute break has helped you decide whether you will or will not answer the questions. and the reasons why.
That's genuinely not what I'm trying to do. I'm really trying to understand why we are not talking about the issues about Singapore, about deliberate anti-alam fossils here, about what our companies are doing about this, and instead you wish to discuss evidence given by my colleague to a parliament, to a really long, in fact 3 long sessions in the US Congress, to ask me detailed questions about exactly what was said. I do not think that's a good use of our time. I really respectfully suggest. And that is not because I don't want to answer your questions. If you want to get to something, get to it. Then let's have other people answer some questions.
Mr. Milner, I think you should leave it to us to decide what is relevant, what is not relevant. But if you're unable to answer questions because you don't know or do not wish to answer the question, please state so. Okay? All right?
Thank you.
Let me explain to you why this is very relevant, Mr. Milner. I spent most of my career looking at what's relevant and irrelevant. The questions before the UK Parliament were very relevant in exploring the degree to which you can be trusted. Facebook can be trusted to answer questions when asked. Facebook can be trusted to be a reliable partner, that a government of Singapore can depend on Facebook to tell us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in proceedings where the witnesses are sworn, or whether you will do everything you can to give lawyers' answers or lawyered answers. And as I told you earlier, one looks at the sequence of conduct from 2015 to 2018, and the very first time you accepted responsibility for Cambridge Analytica publicly, when did that happen? And why did that not happen earlier? And to what extent can we take seriously all these protestations that you can be completely trusted to apply your internal guidelines? It's very relevant. And if you thought that you could turn up here today, not answer questions on Cambridge Analytica, and explain your answers today with your answers less than 5 weeks ago to a different parliament. We are all sovereign parliaments, but we look at your conduct all around the world, and we have to understand. Second, why are we looking at these answers? We are looking at our national security, the consequences we have. By looking at your answers elsewhere, it's clear, and you have confirmed, you will not decide on whether something is true or false. You will not take down something simply because it is false. You will take it down if there is a legal obligation on you. And your argument, up to very recently, through the written representations, through the public statements, through all public positions that you have taken, in essence, is that you will prefer to be regulating yourself with your internal guidelines. That's my sense of it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And that you do not want to be regulated. In that context, we are asking you these questions. If you are embarrassed about being confronted with answers that your colleagues have given to other parliaments, you can say so. If you feel unable to support them, of course you can say so. But I think you will leave the relevance of the questions to me, and for me to be directed by the chair. Can we move on? I don't need an answer from you.
In the meantime, more skeletons tumble out, followed by more startling admissions by Team Facebook. It now turns out that hate speech exploded on Facebook and amplified the Rohingya crisis in Myanmar. Analysis shows a spike in hateful posts, and the Facebook CEO has now admitted to the role his platform may have played in exacerbating the tragedy in Myanmar.
Facebook's dominance is under threat. The social media giant is trapped in a web of controversy. Condemned by the world for its failures during the 2016 US elections and its ties with Cambridge Analytica, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg finds himself in a situation that's best described with the status message, "It's complicated." A researcher has now accused Facebook of playing a role in spreading hate speech at the start of the Rohingya crisis in Myanmar. Raymond Serrato, the man who has carried out this research, claims that a Facebook group was instrumental in spreading hate. The group was run by supporters of hardline nationalist group Mabatha. Serrato claims there was a remarkable spike in the number of posts and engagement levels around the time the government forces launched their clearance operation. The violence forced more than 6 lakh Rohingyas to leave Rakhine, turning the situation into the world's biggest humanitarian crisis. Most of them are still trapped in relief shelters like these. Myanmar's leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, has faced the wrath of the world for her failures to contain the situation. She recently urged her citizens to stay united. Mark Zuckerberg was quick to respond to the criticism against his company. During an interview, he said that Facebook takes these issues seriously and they've received a lot of focus inside the company. The governments of India and Bangladesh have claimed that the exodus also poses a security threat. The Rohingya refugee crisis is one of the most pressing issues in both the countries. Tens of thousands of Rohingya refugees from Myanmar have crossed over to Bangladesh after violence in the state of Rakhine. The mass exodus of Rohingyas has turned the coastal city of Cox's Bazar into a massive relief camp. The Indian government too had made it clear that it cannot accept Rohingya refugees. The Modi government's decision to deport such refugees has been challenged in court. As the crisis was unfolding in 2017, Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, or ARSA, also stepped up its activities. They became a subject of global news coverage when they struck 30 police posts down in Rakhine last year. 12 people were killed in the attack. Top members of ARSA have been linked to Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI. Some reports even claim that the ISI is trying to hatch a conspiracy to foment unrest, using Rohingya terror groups like ARSA. As the crisis continues, there is a need to keep a watch on the activities of Myanmar's radical groups on social media. More than 14 million citizens of Myanmar use Facebook, and the number of users is steadily growing in the country. Some experts believe that many of them consider Facebook as their only entry point for information on the internet. Mark Zuckerberg now faces an even bigger challenge to tackle radical elements on the platform. Bureau Report, WION.
Breaking news coming in. Scientists in the United Kingdom have not been able to prove that Russian-made nerve agent Novichok was used in the Salisbury attack. The head of the military facility, who is working on the samples collected from the scene, has said that they have been unable to identify the precise source. But the British government, building on the initial report, used a number of other sources to piece together a conclusion. Only last month, British Prime Minister Theresa May told her country's parliament that Russian nerve agent Novichok was used to poison Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia. Joining us from Moscow, and this should be interesting, Jack Parekh, our correspondent from Moscow, is with us. Good evening, Jack. This is something that Russia has been saying from the word go, that they're the world's scapegoat, and the investigation has not come to a conclusion, and yet they are being blamed, and their diplomats have been expelled. How do you expect Moscow to respond to this latest report?
Well, I don't think there'll be too much excitement just yet, for a number of reasons. Firstly, the UK government certainly isn't expected to back down from its position against Russia over this Salisbury attack. And also, it is all that this scientist is saying at the moment is that they can't prove that it was produced in Russia. They're saying that they do know that this is Novichok, that this is the nerve agent is used, but they can't exactly pin the source as being produced in Russia yet. So that's something that, I mean, it's an initial, very small piece of information we're getting on what they're doing there. And also it isn't Porton Down, where this research centre is there, it's not their responsibility to decide whether they actually do believe it was Russia who conducted this attack or not. So there won't be too much excitement yet, but as you say, the Russian position is that this is a complete farce. In fact, in an interview with the BBC, the Russian EU ambassador insinuated that it could have been Porton Down itself that released this nerve agent, with Porton Down being very close to Salisbury where the attack took place. Really, the diplomatic spat between Russia and the United Kingdom and many other Western countries that have got behind the UK will continue and isn't likely to sort of ease off on the back of this small piece of information we've got from the scientists there in the United Kingdom.
Right, and while all sides have taken positions on this, would it come as embarrassment for the British Prime Minister and her government, and is she expected to lose some of the support that she's received from Western countries, especially on this case?
I don't think so. As I say just yet, the British government certainly isn't changing its position. They say that this isn't only about a sort of scientific investigation, that they have intelligence that makes them understand that it was a Russian-conducted attack. And that's, well, they haven't quite gone so far as that yet, but there's an understanding that this is based on intelligence reports and not only on scientific reports. So as yet, the British government is certainly not expected to back down. We will have to wait and see whether there is any news from the UK Prime Minister in the fallout from this piece of information from Porton Down.
Meanwhile, just to recap for our viewers who may not have followed this case, Jack, Russia has been asking to be made part of this investigation from the word go.
It has indeed, and also we know that Russia has been asking for access to Yulia Skripal, the daughter of Sergei Skripal, who was poisoned as part of this attack. They want consular access to her. We know that the UK Foreign Office is considering that. So at the moment, but it looks like that they're going to ask Yulia Skripal whether the Russian authorities can have access to her. It's all resulted in over 130 diplomats from a number of different countries being expelled, Russian diplomats being expelled, and then Russia expelling theirs in response. So at the moment there is a sort of real tension between Russia and Western nations, and we'll have to wait and see whether this small piece of information changes any of it.
Heartbreaking images from Syria. Now, if there was any doubt that Riyadh's relationship with Tel Aviv is changing, the Saudi Crown Prince has put it to rest. Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, has told an American publication that Israelis are entitled to live peacefully on their own land. When asked if he thinks the Jewish people have a right to a nation state in at least a part of their homeland, the Crown Prince said, and I'm quoting, "I believe the Palestinians and the Israelis have the right to have their own land, but we have to have a peace agreement to assure the stability for everyone and to have normal relations." The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia does not recognize the state of Israel. Riyadh has always maintained that normalizing ties is dependent on Israel withdrawing from Arab lands captured in the 1967 Middle East War, the very same territory Palestinians hope to call their state in the future. The Crown Prince went on to say, and I'm quoting again, "We have religious concerns about the fate of the Holy Mosque in Jerusalem and about the rights of the Palestinian people. This is what we have. We don't have any objection against any other people." That is quite a shift. The Prince is currently touring the United States to consolidate investments and support to rein in Iran's influence in West Asia. Tensions, in fact, between Tehran and Riyadh have added to suggestions that shared interests with Israel could see an unlikely partnership between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The Prince, far from swatted away that prospect, and I'm quoting again, he said, "There are a lot of interests we share with Israel, and if there is peace, there would be a lot of interest between Israel and the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, the GCC countries." Just last month, remember, Saudi Arabia opened up its airspace for commercial flights to Israel for the first time. And though Saudi Arabia condemned the US President's Jerusalem decision, shifting the US Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, it is believed that Riyadh is on board with a broader American strategy for an eventful Israel-Palestinian peace deal. Interesting times in that part of the world. Afghanistan's Kandahar city, which has been tormented by violence and terrorists, got a rare reason to celebrate. The city's first cricket stadium, built with assistance from India, opened its doors for players and for visitors. Here's a report.
What do you think of when you hear of Kandahar? The IC-814 hijacking, Taliban violence, devastation after years of fighting. Look at this, the new face of Kandahar. This is the Kandahar Cricket Stadium, spread over 44 acres, symbolizing the hopes of a nation torn by years of war. A gift from India to Afghanistan, the stadium has been built with $1 million grant from New Delhi to Kabul. For a country that is just beginning to find its feet on the international cricket scene, this couldn't have been better timed.
While the US-led coalition struggles with its unending war in Afghanistan, it's India that is helping Afghanistan rebuild itself. From schools to highways to parliament building to various other infrastructural development projects, India is slowly but surely helping its old ally rebuild itself.
This is another example. The Afghanistan-India Friendship Dam, earlier known as the Salma Dam, inaugurated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in June 2016. The fruition of hard work by more than 1,500 Indian and Afghan engineers in very challenging conditions. 2 months later, the store place in Kabul was restored and inaugurated. The Afghan Parliament building was built with Indian assistance and 700 crores rupees in aid. India has taken up 116 community development projects in 31 provinces in Afghanistan, in areas of education, health, agriculture, irrigation, hydropower, sports and administrative infrastructure. With billions already invested in connectivity projects and aid, India's commitment to Afghanistan is a long-term one. It hasn't always been a good innings, but Delhi is willing to hold on to the strike. Bureau Report, WION.
China's President Xi Jinping took to the shovel and hoe this week in a bid to show his hands-on approach to the greening of his country. He joined school children in digging and watering recently planted saplings, an event which seemed as much of a greening of the People's Republic as of the president's own stiff, earnest image.
Xi Jinping in full gardening attire, lauded by clapping onlookers and the volunteers who joined into this tree planting program. Xi Jinping said that by getting his own fingernails dirty, he wanted to underscore development and place people at the center of China's extensive land greening program.
老百姓走出来啊，都像在自己的家里的花园里边，沿着路、沿着河建立的绿带，还有围着这个平时几环的这个绿化带。 它不仅是一个这个绿化生态效应，它也让人民群众啊生活在这里，跟这个绿化融为一体，这个很重要。老百姓生活的这个觉得很舒适。
And that's all very well, but is it really something new? China has been working on greening cities and fighting air pollution for a while. What is new, however, is Xi Jinping's action man approach. We usually see him in suits, all camera smiles, and surrounded by dozens of very serious men. So did the Chinese head of state draw inspiration from India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, whose Swachh Bharat or Clean India initiative has had him digging and shoveling for the past 4 years, and who's never spared an occasion to pick up the broom and get sweeping? Or could it be the staunch outdoorsman Vladimir Putin, who loves dogs, wild cats and bears too, and is an action man of world repute? Whatever the motive, Xi Jinping appeared well at ease in sweatpants and surrounded by children. Whether he was emulating other world leaders or not, Xi's spot of gardening certainly made for an unusual vision, that of a leader trying to undo the damage his country's huge industry would have wrought over the past decades of its dizzying rise. Arabella Sibalak, WION.